If you'll open your Bibles to Psalm 63. We're going to be in Psalms today, this morning. And it's only 11 verses, but I'm going to go ahead and read it. I'm reading out of the NIV, so if your translation is a little different, that's fine. In verse 1, it says, "You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you in a dry and parched land where there is no water. I've seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory." Number 3, "Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands. I will be fully satisfied as with the richest of foods. With singing lips my mouth will praise you. On my bed I remember you. I think of you through the watches of the night." 7, "Because you are my help, I sing in the shadow of your wings. I cling to you, your right hand upholds me. Those who want to kill me will be destroyed. They will go down to the depths of the earth." 10, "They will be given over to the sword and become food for jackals. And finally, 11, "But the king will rejoice in God. All who swear by God will glory in him, while the mouths of liars will be silenced." I was thinking about how to introduce this chapter this morning, and I had this long introduction. And it's very simple. I think that some of us, but the majority of us, we struggle with life. We do. It's part of life. Sometimes, like Pastor Koss was saying this morning, we make decisions and we hit a wall because of our decisions, because of bad decisions that we make in our lives. And we hit a wall. And then we're like, we don't know what to do anymore. And here in Psalm 63, we have David. I'll give you a little bit of background on what was going on in his life at that moment. Because if you just read it, you would think that it seems to be a happy moment because he's glorifying God, because he's worshiping God. And in reality, he's fleeing from his son, Absalom, who's trying to kill him. He's left his kingdom. He's left his wives. I know it sounds bad, but he's left his wives. He's left all his possessions, and he's in the wilderness now. And so I think about what he must have been going through at that moment. You know, he's the king. He was the appointed king at the time. And his own son was coming after him, and he wasn't worried about that. At that moment, he was worshiping God. And I think sometimes we lose focus on this because of life decisions, because of our whatever it is that we're going through at that moment in our lives. And we focus on the condition, our situation. And we forget to worship and honor God. We forget to give him the glory, you know. And so we focus on our problems. And this morning, let me catch up with my notes. And this morning, I just want us to see how David responded to his situation, because this chapter here is only 11 verses, but you can be divided into 3 sections, and it can be divided into 3 sections. Verses 1 and 4, it's God my desire. Verses 5 and 8, God my delight. And then finally, 9 and 11, God my defense. Divided into 3 sections, and you see this in chapter 63 of Psalms. And so what does it mean? Let me back up. Here David was seeking after God despite his situation. Despite that his own son was looking to kill him. He'd left his kingdom. He was seeking after God. And so what does that look like? What does it mean to seek after God? Well, the first thing is, right there at the opening of the verse, it says, "You, God, are my God." You see, David had a personal relationship with God. I went online over the weekend, and I looked online to see who our major was, and it's still Mr. Bobby Brown. I mean, you can read his biography. You can learn a little bit about him. But if you really want to get to know him, you have to have an encounter with him. You have to have a moment where someone introduces you to him. And then after you're introduced to him, you can sit down and you can develop that relationship. And you become friends with him. The same thing with God. You have to have a chance encounter, with God through Jesus Christ. And that's how you become, that's how you establish that relationship with God, is through Jesus Christ. It's not, and David knew this. See, in John chapter 17, verse 3, it says, "Now this is eternal life, that they know you, the only true God." See that word there, know? That's a verb, like run, jump, hide. That's a verb. And usually, us as Christians, we just like to superficially know a little bit about God. And we think that we can hang up our hats on that and move on with life. And here, that verb, know, that's every day you're seeking out God. That's what David was doing. Every day he was seeking out God. It wasn't just in his time of need or when things were going his way. No. Here's the definition of know in our dictionary. Having developed a relationship with someone through meeting and spending time with them. That's what that verb know means. Do you know God? Or do you just seek him out when life gets a little hard? You only remember him when you've been blessed with, whatever it is that you've asked him for. And so seeking God means you develop an intimate relationship with him through Jesus Christ. Secondly, to seek God means always to desire more of him. And this is in verse 1 again. It says, "Earnestly I seek you, I thirst for you, my whole being longs for you." The illustration here is this, that Socrates had a young fella come up to him and said, "Hey, I want to be your disciple." And Socrates ignored him, and he just walked. They were walking next to the Mediterranean, and so Socrates walks out to the ocean, just waist deep, and the fellow follows him, and he says, "Hey, I really want to be your disciple." And Socrates just turns around and dunks him in the water, and holds him there. He holds him. Of course, the young fellow is going to be trashing, trying to get up. And Socrates finally releases him when he knows that he's had enough. And the kid gets up and he's gasping for air. And Socrates says, "When you are searching for truth as much as you are searching for air, that's when you can be my disciple." That's how we're supposed to be with God. You have to want to know him. You have to want to be intimate with him. You have to. That's how much desire David had for him. It says here, "I thirst for you, my whole being longs for you." His whole being. Does the essence of who you are, does that long to know God in the same way? That's how we're supposed to be. And here David gives us this illustration. Almost coughed. So how much do you desire to know God? Is it just on Sundays and Wednesdays? Is it just when we have our small groups? Or maybe you just come to Sunday school and you skip service. Is that the only time? Because that's superficially you're just knowing God. There is no deep understanding of who God is or what Jesus Christ did on the cross. To seek God means to pursue God alone, to fill the void in your life. See, David was out there by himself. Yeah, he had a couple of his soldiers with him to protect him. He was the king still. But he was out there by himself. Everything. His wives, his own son was looking to kill him. His kingdom was falling apart around him. And so when I read this, I try to put myself in his situation. And I'm like, what is it that I need to feel? And I'll share something with y'all. I haven't seen my son in 11 years. There's a void there. I haven't seen him in 11. I don't even know what he looks like. There's a void that needs to be filled. And any parent, anybody who is a parent understands this. But I seek after God because I could feel it with work. I could feel it with other activities outside of church or outside of work. But here David gives us the example. When I read this, David gave me the example. He feels it with God. that void, that emptiness, that sometimes we feel this emptiness. God feels this. Only God can do this. Your careers, your jobs, your education, everything. See, when I was going to SFA, you have this idea. You think that, oh, once I get done, I'll be satisfied, and it's not true. It isn't. I don't know. I just like to learn, but besides that, you think that that's it, and it's not. Because the only one who can satisfy that void, the only one who can satisfy that is God. And here, you see, when David says, the only one who can satisfy me is you. I'll give you an example. When I was in Iraq, when we came home, the first thing that I wanted to eat was a Whataburger. It was. I mean, I came home and I remember the food on the plane. It was good. I mean, after eating all the MREs over in Iraq, I came home. And I remember my parents picked me up over in Mississippi, and we drove all the way. We were coming home, and I don't remember if we stopped on the way back home, if we went over to Whataburger. But I remember biting into that Whataburger, and it was just so, and I'm being honest with y'all, it was just so satisfying. It was just like, I know, Whataburger, and it's a free one. It was so satisfying. That's what it's supposed to be. That's what David was talking about when he was seeking after God. When he had his feel of God, it was just so satisfying. That feeling that you get when you eat a good big old steak, and it's just so satisfying. That's what David is comparing it to. And that's what we're supposed to be. We just sang about this in the second song. You satisfy me because of your love. Is that true? And that's how we're supposed to be. And I remember biting into that water, and I'm like, wow, this is so good. And it's the same thing with God. When I sit down and I read my Bible, I'm like, oh, this is so good. This preaches to me, even now, To seek God, you seek Him to fill that void in your life. So you have to have a personal, intimate relationship with Him. And He's the one that fills that void in your life. And so the second question is, what does it look like? What does that look like? What does a person who is seeking after God, what do they look like? And here David gives us the examples. There's inner satisfaction in verse 5. I will be fully satisfied. We just talked about this. I will be fully satisfied. The second one is that person has inner joy. Listen to what it says in verses 5, 7, and 11. With singing lips I will praise you. I sing in the shadow of your wings, but the king will rejoice in God. You see, it doesn't matter what our circumstances are. If you have God in your life and He is the hub in your life, you will have inner joy. I'm not talking about joy like you see some people, they smile all day, but I'm talking about inner joy, satisfying joy from God. That's who provides this. It's not my job. It's not my career. It's not my education or the level of my education. No, it's my relationship with God. That satisfies me and it gives me inner joy, in spite of what my situation may be like. That's what David is showing us here. Because think about it. He was in the wilderness. His own son was looking to kill him. I can't even imagine that your own son wants to kill you. And here he is, and he's satisfied with God, and he's praising God. Thirdly, the person who is seeking God has inner stability and strength in crisis. Listen to what it says in 7. It says, because you are my help, I sing in the shadow of your wings. I cling to you, your right hand upholds me. See, David understood this, that it wasn't because of his own strength or because of the mighty man that he had. No, it was because God was the one who was sustaining him. And he knew who to cling to. Who do you cling to? Do you cling to your spouse? Do you cling to your job, your career, your education? Or do you cling to God? Because here David shows us that he was clinging to God. And he knew that the one who was sustaining him was God himself. See, in the NIV it says cling. I think it's in the King James Version it says cleave. And it's like to adhere to, it's like an adhesive. It's stuck. You stick together. You're supposed to be glued to God and you hold on to him. I'm going to share another part of me. Several years ago, I remember, y'all have heard, I think y'all have heard the story of the lady who had been bleeding for 12 years or something in Luke, Mark, and it's in the Bible. And then she heard about Jesus, and so she went around him and she touched his cloak. That's all she did. She just touched it and she was healed. You see, that's the idea here. That's what David is doing. He is holding on to God. And that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to cling to God. We're supposed to hold on to him. Yeah, he supports us. He's the one who sustains us. And David is telling us this here. You know, the person who seeks after God has inner perspective and balance. This is what it says in verses 9, 10, and 11. Those who want to kill me will be destroyed. They will go down to the depths of earth. They will be given over to the sword and become food for jackals. But the king will rejoice in God. All who swear by God will glory in him, while the mouths of liars be silenced. I think as I've grown older, I have matured. It's going to sound silly, but I have matured, in the sense that used to, when I had friends who would wrong me or say something bad about me, it was like, oh, I got to get back at him. That's our first response. And unfortunately, the world works like that. If they get offended, they got to get back at somebody, whoever it was that offended them. And that's how they work. And here, David shows us that he understands that the person who is going to judge is God. You see, the person who is righteous is God. And this is why he could go out in the wilderness and escape being captured, because he knew who was in control of the situation. It was God. And sometimes we forget. I know I do sometimes. And I have to be reminded. My mom tells me, she says, oh, you're not the one in control. I'm not. I have a sovereign God. He's the one in control. He's the one who's sustaining me. And here David understood his calling. And that's why he could say this, because he knew, hey, I'm supposed to be king. That's what God has called me to be. And he's going to take care of the situation. See, I know this is difficult. I know it's difficult to say when you're going through issues in your life, you're struggling through life, or maybe you have health issues, to say that there is a sovereign God. Because as humans, we like to be in control. We like to make the decisions in our lives because we see the results. If I jump off of here right now, I see the result right now, right here. But who is in control even now as I breathe? It's not my own body who's breathing. It's God who's breathing into me. He's the one who sustains me. He's the one who's holding me upright right now. Oh, because he's the one that designed us. He's the sovereign one. So how do we seek after God? Well, number one, you have to have a relationship with Jesus Christ, because it's only through Jesus Christ that you can have a relationship with God. That's the only way. Outside of Jesus Christ, you cannot approach the throne. You cannot come after God. You can't look for him. It's only through Jesus Christ. But here's 3 points. You seek God by putting him at the center of your relationship, of your life. In verse 3, it says, your love is better than life. I had to read that like 3 times. Your love is better than life. Your love is better than life. Your love, God, is better than living here on earth. And it is. Even Paul said this, I yearn to be in his presence. And sometimes I do. Sometimes I do. I can't wait to be in his presence. Because all we're going to do is worship and honor and glorify him when we're in heaven. Your love is better in life. I cling to you. Your right hand upholds me. Again, this is the part where he is holding on tight to him. Let me explain this word cling. It says to hold on tightly, to adhere, to remain very close to remain persistently and stubbornly faithful to something. And I like that. Sometimes I wish I knew how to read Hebrew and Greek, because their words are very. And our words get lost in translation. In Spanish, there's some words that I'll say that I can't translate them verbatim. I have to use an expression of 5 words to explain what that means. And here, when it says to cling, in Hebrew, their word is used in the sense of affection. You cling to somebody because you love them, because you feel love for them. This is the same word that's used in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, where the man and woman cling to each other. That's what that means, because you love each other. And it's the same one that's used with Ruth and her mother-in-law. She clinged to her mother-in-law. If y'all remember that story, she said, no, go back to your homeland. And she's like, no, I will follow you. Wherever you go, I will go. I will make your God my God. And that's what we're supposed to do. That's what David is showing us here. That we are supposed to seek him out. And so thirdly, to seek God, we do this consistently by spending time with him. What does this mean? This means that here, and I'll show you some verses. In the second part of verse 1, it says, "Earnestly I seek you. My lips will glorify you." Verse 3. Verse 4, "I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands." In verse 8, it says, "I cling to you." Here's the example. Say, for example, there's a young fella who's going over at SFA, and he's got 19 hours of schoolwork, and then maybe he's working part-time at some job. And he tells his friends, 19 hours is a lot. And so he tells his friends, "Hey, I have bukus loads of schoolwork. I don't have time to spend with y'all." And then halfway through the semester, he meets the girl of his dreams. Yeah, I know it sounds funny, because you know what? Now he makes time to seek her out. Those 19 hours is no longer 19 hours, and he seeks her. See, that's what we're supposed to do with God. If you love God so much, you should make time in your daily lives to sit down and seek him. That's what we're supposed to do. I'm guilty of this. I get home and I'll crash. Before I know it, it's already 9 o'clock. I'm like, oh, wow. Wash my clothes, do what I got to do, and go to bed. And I don't even remember to read my Bible. I'll do it in the morning when I get up. 5:30 rolls around, I get up and I'm rolling out. I don't even remember. Oh, I'll do it during lunch. I'll make time then. Can you imagine? Think about this. Those of you who are married, can you imagine doing that to your spouses? That's what we do with God. I'm guilty of it. I shouldn't do that. We should be like the young man over at SFA who makes the time to seek out this beautiful girl. We should seek the time, or we should make the time to seek out God, who is our creator, who breathes life into us. We should do that. Not go home and crash. I'm guilty of that. When you seek God, you integrate him into every aspect of your life. What does that mean? Like on a bicycle, you have the spokes, and then you have the hub. Without the hub, the spokes are useless. The bike's not going to be able to hold up your weight. It's not. God is the hub of your life. He should be the hub of your life. He's not a spoke. He is the hub. Every decision that you make in your life, from where you're going to go get your education, to your next career move, to who you should marry, to your friends, everything should be centered around him. Ricardo Costa this morning was very right. When you leave him out of the equation, you hit the wall. And it's not because he has abandoned you, it's because you have abandoned him. You've left him out of the equation. And then life gets hard and you wonder why. See, he should be the center of our lives. And here David gives us this great example. That despite the situation, despite of everything that was going on around him, the center, his main focus was God. And that's who he was praising. That's who he was honoring. Yes, he was still having to take care of the few guys that were out there with him to defend, to help him fight. But his main focus was God. We lose that focus sometimes. We focus on our families. We focus on our church activities. We focus on our careers. We focus on our education. And God is on the back burner. And we leave him out of our lives. And then when we are faced with decisions in our lives, when we are faced with difficult situations in our lives, we're like, why is this happening to me? Why is this? Because God is on the back burner. And here David shows us, he gives us this great example, that we should be focused on God. And so I'll end with this, with a question. How is your relationship with God? I met a lot of friends over at SFA. That was my primary question. When they used to tell me, I'm a Christian. Oh yeah, how do you identify with Jesus Christ? Some of them got mad. Why are you asking me this? I'm a Christian. Oh. And I think I was telling Alana this the other day, that there was only one individual who ever answered me and told me, hey, I identify him as my Lord and Savior. Only one person of everybody I've ever asked. So my question is to you this morning. Where do you stand in relationship to God and Jesus Christ? And go home. I got up this morning, I preached to myself this morning. I was like, man, I need to do some of this stuff, and I'm going to be preaching it. I have to. I can't preach it and walk off the pulpit and say, okay, y'all got it, guys. I don't know how y'all going to do it. I have to live what I preach. I have to. I can't preach it if I'm not going to live it. So let's pray.